about it a little bit. India's still very strong, but they're losing market share. They're losing market share for a lot of reasons. Past performance, cost overruns, that whole thing with the technical specifications. What issues come along with that is the amount of rework that has to be done when an American company finally gets the code and they realize it isn't exactly what they wanted. So now you've got to go into this big rework phase, which just adds to the total cost of ownership. So they're losing a lot of market share, plus there's a whole bunch of different countries that are getting into this whole space that are taking a lot of market share away from India. There's issues with China. There's some animosity between China and the United States right now when it comes to offshore. And I don't know if you guys hear a lot about China manufacturing, but they're sending a lot of product to the US that we're finding are dangerous, either with chemicals that are not allowed to be used in the United States, lead paint that a kid's going to ingest and get lead paint poisoning, you know, a lot of things like that. So China's getting a really bad reputation right now. Plus we've got the issues with time zone and language with China. So they're in a bit of a mess right now. And then what I always tell the Brazilian companies and the American companies is we've got to be considerate of currency fluctuations and stability. In every contract that I try to do with a Brazilian company and an American company, I put a clause in there, or I try to negotiate a clause in there that says every year, let's look at the exchange rate fluctuation, and if it fluctuates over X percent, the Brazilian company has the opportunity to change their rates. Otherwise, if the real takes a dip, it comes right out of you guys' margin. So we try to cover you with things like this. As far as rate increases, where India's really getting hit right now with their inflation, the normal wage increases in the United States run from 3 to 10%. Asia, according to A.T. Kearney, is at the 20 to 40% rate, and some people say that India is as high as 50% inflation on wages right now. And I don't know if you've heard about this in Brazil, I'm sure you have in the press. The problem is India is creating this middle class that they never had before. Before, an Indian programmer would get out of university, he'd go to work for Tata Infotech, and he'd retire from Tata Infotech. Now with this middle class and everything that's going on in India, these programmers are jumping from company to company every 2 years chasing the rupee. They want more money. And that's killing the Indian companies because they're losing the expertise and the experience. The American companies are getting very upset because the project team you start with isn't going to be the project team you're going to end up with, especially when you're talking about key people like a project manager or an architect. People that the American company gets very nervous when somebody makes a phone call and says they're leaving and now we've got to replace them. So this is a huge problem for India right now. One that Brazil's done very, very well as far as maintaining stable rates. So again, the Wall Street Journal did an article a couple months ago about India, and what they said was 25% of India's computer engineers have the proficiency in the language, the cultural fit, and the practical skills to work with U.S. corporations. Only 1 in 4 is really in a position that they should be doing anything offshore. Only 1 in 4. That's according to the Wall Street Journal. And then they did another article about 3 weeks later. They did the series on India. And what they said was that the wages in India are increasing 10 to 15% a year, although a lot of companies are experiencing 50% a year. While the wage inflation in the U.S. is at about 3%. I mean, last year when we had the financial crisis, pretty much salaries just froze. If you didn't lose your job, you weren't going to get a pay raise or a bonus, unless you worked on Wall Street. But let's not go there. That's still some bad topics in the United States, the Wall Street bonuses. So Robert and I, we go to a lot of events. Kelly joins us at some of the events in the U.S. We do a lot of exhibiting, a a lot of talking to American companies about what they're looking for in offshore. And the demands that we're seeing, the biggest demands we're seeing, I mean, we're seeing a lot of open source, we're seeing a lot of Ruby on Rails, we're seeing a lot of dynamic AX, we're seeing a lot of things. The things that we're getting pulled into the hardest right now is any of the Microsoft's almost like the flavor of the day today. .NET and especially SharePoint are very, very hot in the US. SharePoint, especially in Canada. For some reason, Canada's just really adopted SharePoint. We're seeing a lot of Java, obviously. Java's, the US is the biggest Java community in the world. We embraced it early and passionately. Mobility, as I said before, BlackBerry followed by the iPhone, and now Android's out there. We're not sure if these are going to switch now that AT&T lost that exclusivity. We think BlackBerry's going to stay on top for quite a while, only because of the US government standard, and a lot of people just follow the US government. But that could change. I mean, the iPhone's got over 100,000 applications out there right now and growing every day, and a huge majority of them are free. So there's a huge draw to have an iPhone. And then we're seeing a lot with the new touchscreen stuff, where you can touch the screen and everything. You can buy even the Acer laptop, and a couple others have got touchscreen laptops today. So we're seeing a lot of interest in that. I was at a SharePoint event about a month and a half ago, and one of the companies did a demo of SharePoint. And when he was done, one of the vice presidents at Microsoft took the system back, and it's sitting in his office in Redmond, Washington. He absolutely loved it. And that was done by a Brazilian company. So SharePoint's touchscreen is in demand, becoming in demand right now. So as you think about a strategy for North America, if it's a market you want to consider, and our purpose here today, Robert, Kelly, and mine, is just to give you enough intelligence about it that you can, start to think about what your strategy would be, how to approach it, how to pursue it. You want to think about, whether you want to offer a product or a service. Services are the big winner today in the United States over product, especially in applications development, either project-based or just straight hourly staff augmentation. What's your target market? Is it going to be across verticals, or are you just going to go after everybody with a certain technology? A lot of the shows in the United States are market segment driven, and a lot of them just encompass, all the verticals. Are you going to use direct sales or a channel partner? If you're going to use direct sales, you got to think very seriously about having somebody represent you on the ground in the United States. The American company isn't going to want to have to call down to Brazil to talk to somebody. That was India's big mistake. They started shipping Indians over. They'd come over, they'd spend a week at a Gartner event, they'd all go back to India. And the United States didn't like that because it was almost the perception that, you're here for the money and then you're going to go back again. There's no commitment. So they like to see commitment. They like to see somebody on the ground, be it a Brazilian, be it Robert or I, represent you. They like to see somebody in the United States that they can call up. If you're going to do direct sales, how to do direct sales? The Gartner events, a lot of these other events, Java 1 are very, very expensive, especially if you want to exhibit. Gartner event can be as high as $40,000 for an exhibit booth. So that gets very pricey real quick. One of the advantages of getting involved with Outsource Brazil and Brazil IT and some of these other government initiatives is that you share that cost. The Brazilian government spent a lot of money funding a lot of these events for some of the Brazilian companies.